Hey guys, welcome to 3 Rounds a Minute. My name is Pingu, and today we are going to be talking about Epic Warpath. So, what is Epic Warpath? Epic Warpath is the epic scale wargame from Mantic set in their Warpath universe. So, it's a science fiction fantasy type universe that has these 8 factions you can see here. They are kind of analogous to, I'm sorry, I'm going to commit the cardinal sin of comparing everything to Warhammer, but it serves as a good basis for us all to communicate on. So these races you've got here, we'll go through them in order. The Asterians are sort of effectively your Eldar, technologically advanced. They use a lot of kind of robot servanty type things to go and do their fighting. You've got the Enforcers, which are kind of your Marine equivalents. They're very tough. They shoot really well. They're not amazing in melee, it has to be said, but they are tough, durable, and quite forgiving for a first army. You've got the Forge Fathers, who are Space Dwarves. What more can you want? They've got a great kind of design ethos. They've got some really cool units. They've got that you can see in the back there, these big dreadnought guys. So really interesting faction to play, and they don't really play the same way as the Votan do for 40k, so they're an interestingly slightly different design space. The GCPS are basically the Imperial Guard. If to be fair, they're more like the Marines from Halo, both in design space and how they play. They're not quite the kind of expendable hordes, although you do play them in large numbers. I think I've been playing around with the GCPS recently, and I quite like that you can play with activation control for them. You can get quite a lot of units for your points and try and force your opponent to run out of activations before you. And their units tend to be slightly shorter range than things like the Enforcers, so it helps to let your opponent use up all their activations and then move your shorter range, slightly less tough units into advantageous positions when they've run out of activations. Very cool, I quite like the GCPS. Next up down here we've got the Marauders. They are basically Space Orcs. Again, within the universe, they function differently to the ones that Games Workshop has. They're more like mercenaries, hired guns that will kind of go wherever the money is. So it's not like a direct pull from Games Workshop or anything. Then we've got the Nameless here, which are also very cool. They're Lovecraftian horror in space type things. Very cool. They're not. I wouldn't really compare them to Tyranids. They share some similarities in that they're trans-dimensional horror type things, but I think that they have like I actually think they've got a cooler design space than the Tyranids do, but then subjective things. I really like the Nameless. I'm really looking forward to putting a Nameless army together and see how they play, because the paint schemes you can get away with them being kind of nameless horrors from beyond the realms of imagination, gives you a lot of scope to do some cool painting stuff with them. You've got the Plague, which are, for lack of a better description, the Flood from Halo. It's a plague that infects living things and converts them into, as you can see here, giant muscled rage-filled killing machines. They have a different kind of design space from some of the more melee-focused factions, in that they have kind of the orc style mass shooting that's not very good, and hoping to kind of force saves by mass fire, or at least that's the way I've seen them so far. Really interesting design space. They have kind of like almost like looted GCPS type vehicles. Another cool fun one. I don't think I'm particularly interested in playing them, but I would really like to play against them at some point. And then we've got the Vermin, which are basically Space Skaven. Really cool design. I really love the models and the kind of thinking behind them. Great faction. Really interesting to play against. They've got some great sort of deep striking units that can turn up behind you, and you kind of have to plan for that when you play against them, it's interesting. It means that you're not always playing the same game. And we'll go over it probably in another video, but the scenario generation for this game really gives you a lot of different games to play. You're not always just lining up 24 inches apart and charging towards each other, and that's the game. It has a really kind of rich scenario generation system that I really enjoy, but that's something for another video. For now, what we're going to do is we'll go into the Enforcers army list. We'll go through the units in the Enforcers army, and then we'll try and put together a 2,000 point army together that either you can run and play with right now, or at least it will give you an idea of the kind of thought process that goes into building an Enforcers army so that you can get started. So I hope that helps give everyone an overview of the game and the factions, and then yeah, we'll get into building the list now. So this is the Mantic Companion Army Builder. I've gone in and changed the points values just so that when we get around to writing that 2,000 point on, we don't get a big warning up here telling us we've gone over our points. I'm not going to go through the battlefield stratagems. They are really good for burning those kind of leftover points at the end of a list writing session, but I don't want to go over them now because they're generic and it'll just take up airtime. I can make a short about them later maybe. So, what units do we have? So we've got 5-6 different unit types. So you've got HQs, which are required. Every company must have an HQ and only one HQ. You need to have at least 2 troop choices. So the enforcers only have the 4 here. These unlock specialists. 1 troop will unlock the ability to add single specialist. You've got 4 specialist units. Any 2 troops and or specialists will unlock 1 support. So 2 troops will give you 1 support. 2 troops and 2 specialists will give you 2 supports. 4 troops and 4 specialists will give you the full 4 supports. So it's, you kind of end up in this position where you're balancing your unit builds to get more supports in, because the supports in the enforcers especially are where the real firepower lies. Pardon me. So support's done. Transports are transports. We won't really go over it. They make your inventory quicker. The Drakon Light Cruiser is our only super heavy, and we'll go into detail into that when we get down to it. So, Maven Command Tank. Oh, I lied. This is a super heavy. It's very points expensive for an HQ. My thought process when it comes to building in my armies is that your HQs are here to provide your tactician dice. So you get these command dice at the beginning of each turn. You roll them, and they generate kind of order tokens. The issue here is that while this is a very nice set of tactician dice, 440 points compared to 40 is a massive step change. And realistically, yes, the Maven brings you like lots of blasty guns, and it's very, very tough. It's got a good command radius, and it's got resilience 3, which means it can take a hell of a lot of punishment. The issue with it is that 440 points is a hell of a lot, and making this a super heavy makes it a target, so it needs to be tough, or people are just going to target it and blow it up. Your HQs generally get their resilience from hiding behind infantry units. You can only shoot a non-super heavy HQ if it is the closest viable target, and so these HQs really want to be running behind a unit of infantry, and just, if someone comes within whatever their radius is to shoot stuff, just throw a few shots in. They are great shots, and the peacekeeper captain is great in CC, but don't send these guys out there to do it. There are some factions, I think, that have kind of dedicated like killing HQs. The enforcers is not one of them. They're good. They are not there to do wounds. So I mean, take this if you want. I think the super heavy is interesting. And there's probably a way to build into this so that your Maven is a bit safer, but I'm not that clever, so I'm not running the Maven for now. Next up, we've got the Lieutenant. The Lieutenant is fine. For 40 points, I don't argue with it. I generally will start my list building with 1 Lieutenant and 1 Captain. The 1 orange dice is a bit meh. Command radius is perfectly normal. These stats over here are pretty bog standard for an enforcer. 5 up to shoot, 5 up to assault is pretty normal. 6 up armor is good. It's better than like lighter infantry. 6 up save is pretty good for an infantry model, and it shoots relatively well. But you're only rolling 2 dice. There's only so well it can go. You can give them a transport. You can do the same for the captain and the peacekeeper captain. Sometimes it's a good way to burn 25 points just to get an extra bit of functionality, but I'd probably start with a really powerful battlefield stratagem before I worry about adding a transport to these guys. They get a sprint token every turn anyway. Like, they're not that slow compared to other units, and again, you ideally want them to be behind other units, so unless you're trying to like desperately throw a command radius out to something, I wouldn't be that worried about their mobility. That's not usually the thing that bothers me about them. So yeah, hey, Lieutenant, pretty good, great for the points cost, no notes. The Victor 2 is a bit of an exception to what I was saying before. This thing is, the Victor 2, both the HQ version and the actual unit you get in the unit roster are amazing. Very tough, not very fast, and they shoot fine. They shoot better than, well, about average for enforcers. Don't go punching stuff with them. This assault number is their close combat value. Don't try and punch stuff with them. People will probably charge them, but you're not going to do a great deal of damage. Armor 8 plus means that it's very difficult to hurt you. Bear in mind, you're rolling a D8. Getting an 8 plus on a D8 is not a great feeling. Well, it is if you get it. But anytime anyone's shooting you, if they don't have AP, because they have heavy armor, someone's shooting you without an AP value, they are rolling their hits, they're then halving them rolling down because of heavy armor. That's what heavy armor does if they don't have an AP value. And then once they get whatever those shots through are, they're then rolling 8s to wound you. And then having gotten an 8 plus to wound you, you're then rolling on a 5 up to save it. These things are incredibly tough. On top of that, they have two weapons, one sort of kind of coded anti-infantry and the other one very much an anti-tank weapon. And because of this primary weapon rule, you can fire both of those weapons at different targets. So if you have like an infantry unit running alongside an armored unit, you can split your fire and fire the twin laser blasters at the infantry and the heavy turret gun at the tanks and just have a great time. These things do a shed load of damage. And, you know, he brings a tactician dice along for a bonus. I don't necessarily treat this guy as an HQ, more as an extra Victor Mark II I can bring if I want to. And I quite frequently do, because they're great. But yeah, he's just, the bonus for it is that he's basically a tank commander. Very, very good tank. Oh, there we go. Right, Peacekeeper Captain. So the Peacekeeper Captain is effectively a slightly less good commander than the Captain here. He gets loses out on the black die, and it makes him slightly tougher. You can see here he's got 5 up save rather than a 6 up, and 7 plus armor, so wounding him is harder. But again, I kind of come back to, why are you bringing an HQ? You're not bringing an HQ to do damage. His main job is not to murder things. His main job is to provide you with dice and give you command radius bonuses. For the 20 extra points, you can take this guy in a transport if you want, or if you don't mind losing an extra dice, I'd probably much rather have a Victor Mark II than a Peacekeeper Captain for 5 more points, because the Victor Mark II will just wreck things. So I don't hate the Peacekeeper Captain. I'm not saying never take him. I'm saying, you know, be aware of the fact that you're giving up one of your main points of taking this unit just to get a unit that shoots slightly better. It's really not that big a deal. If your units around you aren't doing the killing for you, your HQ shouldn't be taking up the slack. The HQ can throw a few shots in to help out, but he's not there to do the killing, right? He's there to do the commanding. And obviously, by distinction, by definition, the captain is then, in my eyes, better than the Peacekeeper Captain, because his safety is given to him by being behind other units, and he's providing an extra die, and, you know, he's a hell of a lot cheaper. So I would definitely start with a captain and a lieutenant and see how I went from there. But yeah, that's all the HQs. I'd probably lean towards the captain, lieutenant, and or the victor, although, you know, I wouldn't blame people for taking the Peacekeeper Captain, especially if you're taking a Peacekeeper Heavy Force, because you can just run him along with them. So, troop choices, you got some really good ones here. Heavy Weapons Team, I think these used to be better in the playtesting, and they've toned them down a little bit, which I don't hate. They're still pretty good, especially for 160 points. They're effectively the cheapest troop choice you get. The real trade-off between these guys and the operatives is the operatives have a lighter gun that rolls more dice. This thing, 20-inch range, only 1 die, AP1, which means you're ignoring that heavy armor thing on a lot of units, which is a big deal. Quite a few units have it, so taking an AP1 weapon is actually quite a big change, bigger than an AP1 to an AP2 is, because all you're doing then is negating a single point of armor. But AP1 negates the armor and negates heavy infantry. Heavy armor, so very useful. And on the back of that, you've got Vicious, which is exploding 8s to wound, which is also brilliant with AP1. So they shoot fine. Enforcers shoot relatively well, so other factions would treat this as a relatively elite shooting unit. But these guys are just your bog standard infantry. The range is a little short, so I generally would either put them in a transport or turn 1, sprint them into the mid board if there's a building they can take, and just sit there and threaten, you know, a third of the board. They're a great unit for 160 points. I'd probably consider taking either them or operatives to fill out your mandatory troop choices. However, they have strong competition from these guys. For an extra 5 points, you get Pathfinders. Pathfinders are less tough. They move at the same speed, they have the same unit strength. The big deal here is their special rules. So they have Scout, which lets them take a sprint move before the beginning of the game. So after you've deployed, but before the game starts, you take a sprint. So for these guys, that's 8 inches. And Stealthy. So Stealthy is basically -1 to hit them, or +1 to hit them, depending on how you look at it. So if they get into a building, for example, because of the cover, they get +1 to hit. So now you're looking at +2 to hit them. So instead of, let's say, if they were shooting at them, if another unit that was shooting on 5s was shooting at you, you get 5s basics, 6 for stealthy, 7 for being in a building. So you're only hitting on 7s and 8s. On top of that, they also have these tag rifles. Again, only 20-inch range, but, you know, pretty good for an infantry weapon. Only 1 dice, so you're only rolling 6 dice, because you've only got 6 in the unit. But they ignore cover. So if you imagine that you have 2 units in a building shooting it, or 2 units in buildings shooting at each other, these guys will be +2 to hit, ignoring cover. So very tough in a building. I love these guys. I generally try and bring at least 2, but that, I think that tells you more about my playstyle than anything else. There are other ways to build the enforcers, but I'll go through that when I build my list. Then we have the assault enforcers. I'm not a massive fan of assault enforcers. I feel like they were designed to fill a gap in the enforcers, but do a bad job of it. They're not good enough in assault to make them a truly scary, dedicated assault unit, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that factions should have weaknesses, and I think assault is kind of the enforcer's weakness. They shoot really well. They're relatively tough. Like, they need to have something that they fall down on, and I think assault is one of them. These guys are fine. They shoot fine. Their armor is pretty good. They have no save, but the 9-inch range on their pistols really hurts them. And then when they get into combat, they basically just have pistols with AP1. I don't think that justifies that price. I'm not saying that I would never take them. I'm saying I wouldn't take them at this cost. I think if they were relatively cheap and you could use them as a non-unlocking unit, I'd probably take them and then just throw them at the enemy and hope they did some damage. But I think 185 points, that makes a big difference on what units you could take. You could upgrade a lieutenant to a captain, right? They're not worth the difference in cost for you to bring a mediocre assault unit. Just shoot everything. It works pretty well, trust me. Operatives are kind of expected to be your like bog standard infantry. They shoot for a line infantry. They shoot really well. They're relatively tough. They have an okay weapon. So 15-inch range is a bit short, but 2 dice is nice. It means that if someone is trying to charge into you, you know, to take an objective, they probably are going to spend 1 turn moving towards you and getting shot with those 2 dice, hitting on 5s. And then when they charge you, you're probably going to overwatch, and then you get another load of fire into them. Like, they're not going to make it through that unscathed unless they're incredibly tough. So yeah, I like these guys. I use them to fill out my lists. I generally balance the heavy weapons teams and operatives to give me a bit of long range firepower that will scare a tank, for example, and just some basic objective holders that can like mix it up in medium close range. But yeah, overall, it's a small troop tab. There are other factions that have more, but I quite like almost everything in there. Onto the specialists. The important thing about the specialists is that you can use these guys to unlock more expensive units more easily. So if you take the mandatory 2 troop choices, you can see here that Striders are, you know, 30 points cheaper than the cheapest troop. So you can use these guys as an unlocking unit. That's not to say that these are bad. These guys are great. They have some really interesting like strategic uses. Yeah, again, very much an enforcer stat line. 5/5, so they're okay at everything. Arm 7's pretty nice. The heavy armor also helps. So again, if there's no AP, you're going to struggle to hurt these guys. They have a save of 7+, which if you compare them to the GCPS Striders, the GCPS Striders don't get this save. So they are pretty tough for what they are. The guns are okay. Bearing in mind you only got 3 stands here, 3 dice is only going to give you 9 shots. No AP, no sustained fire, so it'll scare really lightly armored infantry, but outside of that, it's more of like a latent threat than it is an actual threat. The focused fire, again, same deal, because you're only rolling the 3 dice, right? So AP2 is really nice, but in reality, you're not going to wipe a unit with this. The thing that these guys do really, really well is area denial. No one's going to intentionally run their tanks to within 18 inches of these guys. So they're a really good way of kind of denying access to your enemy, or at least forcing your enemy to make a bad decision. Either you get within a place that I can get within 18 inches of you with these striders, or you stay the hell away from this part of the battlefield, because you're going to lose probably at least one tank. The odds are pretty good that you're going to do a fair amount of damage if you do manage to shoot them. So they're a great area denial weapon, and for 130 points, like, it's hard to argue against taking them. I generally take at least one. In fact, I generally take at least one per company because they are the cheapest unlocking unit. Jet bikes. So the jet bikes are 200 points is quite expensive, but they are a very good fast attack unit. So I think every faction gets one of these kind of fast attack units in their specialist box. Oh no, the GCPS get them as troop, but the jet bikes are obviously very quick. They shoot, like an enforcer. What they have that makes them really good for these sort of fast attack units is they've got these range 12 2-dice sustained attack rifles. So they're hitting on 5s, they get 2 dice, so 12 shots from a 6-man unit, and they have sustained attack, so exploding 8s on the hit roll. So for a light unit, they do really well. Couple that with the fact that because they are one of these fast units, they get a save, and 6-up is pretty good. For example, the monocycles for GCPS have a save of 6-up. So they are relatively tough, they shoot relatively well, and they're great for just, nipping out and grabbing an objective. What you'll tend to find is that you end up in these kind of running fights with your opponent's fast attack units. Going after kind of dynamic objectives tends to be their bread and butter. I love these guys. They tend to trade up relatively well for me because of that, aforementioned shooting. Well worth the 200 points, even if just because if you don't take it, you give your opponent's fast attack units free reign to run around and just ignore you. Onto the Peacekeepers. So, Peacekeepers are your heavy infantry choice, much like a kind of Terminator from 40k. They are tough. They've got this heavy armor rule, so again, halving hits from opponents that don't have AP. They've got pretty decent armor as it is, so you're still having to kill them on 7s or 6s if you do have AP. They have really good weaponry, so the Dominator rifles are really good. Sustained attack gives you an awful lot of value, and 2 dice is 2 dice. The important thing here is you can see the difference between these guys. These are kind of your close combat monsters, and these guys are your shooting monsters. Hitting on 4+ with this stat line is really nice. You're going to do a lot of damage with them, and you won't see a lot of that damage come back because of the armor 7 and heavy armor. They're going to have to shoot an anti-tank unit at you, basically. Or, if you're in a building, good luck. My personal favorite thing to do with these guys is put them in something fast and put them on objective in the mid board and just be like, cool, good luck trying to kill this incredibly tough unit in the mid board, and just deny them access to an objective. The thing to be aware of is their unit strength 3-1, so it's not that hard for them to outpoint you, but then you're starting to dictate your opponent's strategy, which is what you really want to do if you're planning to win the game. The Peacekeeper Defenders are a lot more expensive, and what they do well is not dying, so they get an extra save on top of all of what the Peacekeepers have, and they're, you can see here their stats are swapped, so they're better in Assault. They get, the same number of dice, but only AP1, so it's a bit of a weird balancing act they've done there. They've given the better Assault unit the worst weapon. I don't know why. I guess I have to trust them. Generally speaking, what that means is I take the Peacekeepers. They're a really good unit. They are well worth the 215 points, I think. If for no other reason than doing what I said, where you throw them up into the mid-board and you're just like, fine, this is a problem you have to deal with now, and it frees you up to do other things because they're dedicating things to take out the Peacekeepers. Big fan of those guys. They are great. I actually didn't like them when I first started playing the Enforcers. I didn't see the cost as being justified. I played one game with them and immediately was like, nope, I'm wrong. These guys are insane. So yeah, that's all the supports. A big fan of the first three. He kind of, in this list, I tend to find myself recommending 3 out of the 4 each time. So I don't know whether that was intentional from Mantic or not, but they've kind of balanced it quite well in terms of things you might or might not want to take. Okay, so supports. First support is this Panther Punisher unit. This is a Panther chassis, so we'll see the stat line multiple times here. It's fine. There's nothing to write home about. Shoot on 5s, assault on 7s. You don't want to be assaulting people with tanks. 6 up armor, 7 up save. Cool. The distinction from this and the other Punishers is the weapons. So you have this Zeus HE, which is an artillery weapon. It's got a minimum range of 6 inches, maximum range of 30. You roll 1 dice per vehicle, but it's important to know that this is a blast indirect weapon. So you're not shooting in a conventional sense. The way that indirect blast weapon works is that you get your blast template and you place it down where you want the shot to land over, clumped up infantry generally. So you put the template down and you go, right, okay, that's where I want it to land. You take the scatter die, which if you've got the Mantic dice is like the big yellow die with the black arrows on the points. You roll one of those and a d8, and if your scatter die comes up with the hit, which is just like a blast shape, if it comes up with a hit, it lands exactly where you put that template. If it comes up with one of the arrows, it goes the number of inches you rolled on the d8 in that direction. It can be a blessing or a curse. The big deal with this specific artillery piece is it has targeting systems, so you get to re-roll one of those. So the way the blast would normally work is you'd roll a scatter dice and a d8, you'd see where that first blast marker would go. You would then roll the scatter die without the d8, and then your blast template attaches to the original one in the direction that you've just rolled, and you can re-roll one of those. So either the first one, which is generally the one you want to go for, or if it lands bang where you want it to, you can then re-roll one of the subsequent ones if they go in a direction you don't love. Very cool unit. I love these guys. I generally bring either one of these and or a Persecutor Bomber, because they also have a big blast template, and blast templates are really good for getting people out of buildings, for example. I like these guys, and pinning is a debilitating thing, so having a blast indirect pinning weapon that you can fire from behind a building is very useful. On to these guys again, the Victor Mark II. I've kind of talked about them. They are great. You only get 2 in this unit for 160 points. I don't think that's really that bad. I will definitely be bringing one of these. They are one of the scariest anti-tank weapons in the game that I know of that isn't the super heavy. These guys are brilliant. I generally bring at least one of them. And if I can, I'll pair them with the Victor Mark II. Which is a problem. But it's not that big a deal. It was clearly a design choice to kind of balance out the fact that they are really quite a scary unit. I will generally try and bring these guys with the Victor Mark II tank as an HQ, so you get back up to 3 for one thing, but you're then starting to roll a lot more dice into your opponent. And these AP2 weapons are pretty scary. If like you're rolling 3 dice on AP2, like bad things are going to happen. So yeah, well worth it. I love bringing these guys, and for 160 points, it's hard to say no. Yeah, really great unit, tough as hell. 5 up save is amazing. So yeah, bring them if you can. Onto the kind of lighter tank that the Enforcers gain access to. It still gets 6 up save, which is not to be sniffed at. The issue is the weaponry is way less intimidating. You still got the 3 dice, and you're rolling more dice, right? You've got 3 tanks in here, and you're still rolling 3 dice. So you're rolling 9 natively out of here. And AP1 and sustained attack. Like, it's not that much worse, and it's a lot cheaper for an extra tank. There's a lot of value to be had in here. I think there's probably a sort of lightweight horde option you can go for if you really want to with these guys, where you can just like spam Panther grav tanks and a load of Enforcer operatives and a couple of heavy hitters and just try and out activate your opponent, and then send in your big punching thing. I don't know. I think the Panther Grav tank is worth a consideration. I think for the list I write in a minute, I probably won't use them, but they're not terrible. They're just, by comparison to the other things you have in the list, they tend to pale compared to them. But I think at any other army, these would still be spectacular. We then go to the missile tank. This is your first anti-aircraft weapon. They are fine. I can't complain about them. It's 24-inch range, 2 dice, anti-aircraft, AP1 and vicious. It will do the anti-aircraft job for you. It's just a question of whether you want to bring these guys to do it or the interceptor, or both. Right? I'm not going to argue that bringing 2 of these isn't helpful. The cool thing about this is that it's a good weapons platform on its own. If you don't have any aircraft to shoot at, the HMX 32 missile launchers on this thing is still pretty good, and it's still on an okay tank chassis. I wouldn't tell anyone not to bring them. I think definitely bring either one of these or an Inceptor as a minimum, and then like flavor depending on your preference at that point. So speaking of the Interceptor, here he is. This is really cool. I think I know the GCPS have an equivalent to this, but I really like this guy. With the faction that we have, having a flying transport that is still relatively scary on the attack is great. You kind of like load this dude up with a unit that's scary, fly it into the midboard, drop them off on turn 1, and then you have this great harassing unit. I really like these guys, and again, if you're coming up against enemy flyers, they're less scary to those flyers than this missile tank is, right? If you look at the stats. So sustained attack gives you more hits. You're only rolling 6 dice. I guess you're only rolling 4 with these guys. But the AP1 and Vicious is going to make them do a hell of a lot more damage if you do hit against the tougher flyers, especially things like super heavies. I don't know if there must be flying super heavies, but yeah, I would generally take either one of these two. These are better at AA. These guys are just better at harassing. So it depends what you think you're going to come up against. If you really genuinely think you're going to see a lot of flyers, I'd probably go for at least one of these guys, and then maybe this as well as a backup. But yeah, Interceptors are great. They're a bit of a jack of all trades, so they don't do anything particularly well, but they're still pretty good. I'd bring one. The big deal when it comes to the flying circus here, though, is the Persecutor Bomber. Really cheap at 85 points. You get 2 of them. They are fast-ish. They are tough-ish, because they've got that 7-up save. They don't have heavy armor, but they do have fly, which makes them really hard to hit. So fly gives your opponent a -2 to hit you. So they're going to struggle to hit you without the anti-aircraft rule. That's what that does. The big deal with these guys is this weapon. This weapon is incredible. So you only get 1 dice, but it's a blast weapon, so the 1 dice doesn't really hurt you. You take 2 flyers, you drop 2 templates on a group of poor, unsuspecting infantry. It's AP2. The blast for direct weapons is different. You aren't rolling a scatter dice, you're just rolling against your shoot value, which is 5, which is, again, enforcers. So 2 blasts on 5s. Demolisher means that you blow up buildings, which is incredibly powerful. You blow up a building, basically everyone inside it dies. So, beware hiding things in buildings when these things are about. They will do a lot of damage. They ignore cover, so they're not, it doesn't affect their shoot value. And they have vicious, so they're exploding 8s on wounds. So chances are, if there's a unit in a building, you're going to hit them 6 times. You roll to hit them on 5s, and then you get exploding 8s on the wound roll. Very, very cool. I love this unit. I don't think I've played a game without bringing them since I printed the models. They are great. 5 out of 5, no notes. 85 points is brilliant for them. So that's all your kind of normal units. You put the Panther APC, it's just a Panther chassis with a little laser blaster on the top. It's nothing to write home about. It does its job, which is transporting troops. That's all you can really ask for. Yeah, I can't really say much about them. It does its job fine. The only like non-HQ super heavy is this Dragon-like cruiser. I think if you're going to play this, you kind of want to build your list towards doing what this does and supporting it. So it's got orbital deployment, so this thing comes in from outer space, which is in itself pretty cool. It's got a lot of rules to mitigate the negatives from doing that. It's obviously very tough. It gives you an extra black die, so bringing this and a Peacekeeper captain brings you back up to, where the captain would have put you. For more points, obviously. It's got to the death, so it can't lose wounds in CC for running away, which, makes sense. And unflinching, so it can't be pinned, which is useful. You get a load of dice, no AP, which is very sad, but sustained attack is fine. If you're shooting at like light infantry, this thing will reap a pretty bloody path. So depending on what you put in the capacity for this, you can kind of drop this thing down, take out the infantry that's blocking whatever you're trying to kill, and then the units that pop out can do the murdering for you. It's a cool design, and I think you can make it work. I just don't tend to use it at the moment because it doesn't fit my playstyle, but that doesn't say it's bad. It just requires you to make some difficult choices because of the cost, but that's okay. That's kind of the point in super heavies. And there you go. As every unit in the Enforcer's army, we will go through and try and write a 2,000 point army list that would work for kind of your first games. Alright, so writing a 2,000 point list for the Enforcers. Like I said, we might go through the battlefield stratagems at the end of this if we need to fill in some points, but I'll probably make a separate short on them anyway. So, writing 2,000 point army list. Like I said, I will generally start with a captain without a transport and a lieutenant, because that gives me pretty decent command dice for relatively little outlay. Wait, no. We want the captain in company 1 and the lieutenant in company 2. There we go. But I'll fill out company 1 first. So, as a man of my word, I'll probably bring one of these to kind of anchor a defensive position and lob shots into the midboard. They're a nice unit just to have in your back pocket. I think they used to be a lot better and they toned them down a bit. Next up, I'll probably go with Pathfinders. I like to kind of jam in a fair few of these guys if I can. So we've got our first 2 unlocks. I'll probably start with some specialists. So we want to whack in the Enforcers because they're cheap and they do a great job, and whack in the jet bikes because we want to have at least 1 unit of these, like I said. So now we're back to needing to add either unlocking or pick up some supports. So I'll move down and pick up a Punisher. I want at least one of these guys in there, I think. And I might put some Victors in group 2, maybe. So let's go with the Bomber. Group 1 could be the template dropping formation. Am I happy with that? I think we'll stick with that for company 1 for now, and then we'll see how we do with company 2. I will say let's go for another unit of Pathfinders and a unit of operatives for our troops. Then let's say a unit of peacekeepers. Do we want to? So we've got 2 troops, 1 unit of supports. Let's go for another unit of striders. They're cheap and they're really good. I really like them. I think I'll try and drop in the Victor and maybe the interceptors. So we've put the peacekeepers and the interceptors, for example, and cause some actual carnage. How are we looking? We're at 1875. I think I'm going to drop the lieutenant from here, and I'll see if I can put the Victor HQ in here. 1920. So we've got 80 points left over. As you can tell, we can't really add much in here. We could add in a transport unit. Maybe put the heavy weapons in there. I think maybe not. I think I'd rather throw some upgrades on things. Maybe. So we've got the bomber and the interceptor. So we've got some AA. We could maybe replace something to get more anti-aircraft, but I think I'm going to stick with what I've got for now and hope I don't come up against a very flyer-centric force. Maybe we can upgrade the Striders. We could upgrade. I mean, I don't think a jet bike is a good upgrade for the Striders. So I think I probably just... Okay, I think probably the play here is we downgrade the Victor, which makes me very sad. We downgrade the Victor. Could potentially take a second captain, actually. So we now have way more command dice, which is nice. And we need to... What are you complaining about here? We have captain, troop, peacekeeper. Ah, we need another support unit. Let's put the Striders back in. Where'd the Striders go? There we go. So now that we've messed about with it, we have 105 points left. So we could get another... Oh, we can't. We don't have the support slots. This is kind of the game you end up playing when you just try and find points to do things. Man, it's so tricky sometimes. We could drop the Victors and go for Panthers, but I don't love that. We've lost a lot of firepower in this list already. We could drop the Punisher and upgrade them into something a bit more dangerous. Yeah, we could throw the Punishers out and pick up a Grav Tank unit. It makes me sad, but it's not a bad idea. Let's go with the main battle tank variant. Yeah, that's more like it. I think at this point is when I would start thinking about the battlefield stratagems, like what ones I want to bring, and then what points costs that leave me at. I quite like quick thinking. It gives you an extra +2 to your first initiative roll, which is quite nice. Like having initiative turn 1 is very useful, obviously. Take and hold is quite cool, so that allows you to attempt to hold on to a dynamic objective. So they flip each turn. If you have it active, you can roll a 5 up to keep it active, which can swing games depending on the scoring scheme quite heavily. So that leaves us with 50 left. So we could just put these guys in transports. I mean, you're not, like, if you look at the costing of things, you're not going to get anything else for 50 points. And the Enforcers have relatively few upgrades to their units. So I think what we can just do is grab both of our captains. That's one in Company 1. That's one in Company 2. And let's get rid of this guy. And that gives us 2,000 points. There you go. So what have we got? What are we looking at here? We're looking at a captain in his transport, 1 heavy weapons team, a Pathfinder team, a team of jet bikes, 3 Striders, a unit of Panthers, and a bomber. And then we go back, another captain. So we've got a decent number of command dice here, and another APC. Unit of Pathfinders, so they're just a good like filler unit. Another unit of Pathfinders, Peacekeepers to be a bit scary. Another unit of Striders, some Victors for a bit of firepower, and an Interceptor, which I think I'll probably put the Peacekeepers in. Alright, there we go. That's 2,000 points of Enforcers. Hopefully that list gives you a bit of context. I'm not saying that you have to wear that list every time. I don't think that's the best list ever written by any means. But it should give you a bit of context around picking your units for Enforcers, what does what, and what is effective in what roles. I think it's probably going to change an awful lot over the coming months as people learn the rules and find something that works as like a constant meta. Feel free to jump backwards forwards. Hopefully I've put timestamps in here so you can jump around. I would love to hear what anybody has to say about this. I feel free to question any of my assumptions. I am by no means an expert yet. I just think it's worthwhile having some content out there to spark the discussion. So hopefully that was helpful to you all, and hopefully I'll speak to you all again soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.